Hey, how's it going? Anthony Ferraro here at Create Sci-Fi. Today we're going to do a fairly simple project, but something that I think is exciting for a lot of people. All right, a while ago when George Lucas, sold the rights to Star Wars, all of a sudden all these toys started showing up everywhere at like really affordable prices. And like now, even like in the discount stores, I found this lightsaber for $5, right? So I'm old enough to be bittersweet about this. When I was a real little kid, right? It's like you're making thing out of cardboard and paper towel rolls. And then you get a little older and then you buy toys as an adult that you couldn't afford as a kid. But now we're in a place where, this is definitely not something you would put on your shelf, but I have like nieces and nephews. Something like this is fantastic. But for people like us, this is also another opportunity to make a really cool lightsaber, a touchstone of something that we love. But for such an inexpensive price, we can mod this a little. Not go for like screen accurate, like like a hero prop from a character, just like a lightsaber from the universe for $5, some paint and some of your time, and we can have something really cool. So I'm really excited about this. I think I'm thinking to go like graphite black with some silver highlights, right? Just my own character in this universe, not like some hero prop from a known character. So, this whole thing's probably going to cost, like, with the paint, probably like under $10. So yeah, so let's dive right in. All right, so we take a look at what we got. What we got for $5, not so bad. All right, first thing I do is just kind of get a feel for the piece, take a look, kind of plan my attack. It's got a good weight to it, but I'm definitely gonna have to adjust that. So the first thing we want to do is just go ahead and take it apart. The first order of operation is just to see how much you can cleanly take it apart and gut it. Now I realized really quickly that because this is inexpensive, it's actually not that well made. So there's a lot of hidden screws. It just was not worth it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and persuade this to come apart. This is not the way I like to do it, but for this, I figured it would be fine. So what I'm doing here is just drilling out a hole in the bottom because I know I'm going to want to add weight. So I want to give myself a little cavity for that. And then in the battery compartment, I'm going to utilize that to add a second weight. The weight I just find is just a really important element. So now I'm just taking my sanding drum and again making a room for this lead weight, and square peg, round hole. So you just gotta you gotta massage it. You gotta little bit at a time, You never want to do too much because you can always add, you can't subtract, right? So now I'm just taking a generous amount of hot glue and I'm just popping that in there, and with some super glue I'm sealing in that battery cap permanently. And then now in the bottom where I drilled that hole, I'm going to put the piece of lead down there. So now I'm going to go ahead where I yanked out the lightsaber. It's a little rough in there, so I clean it out. And then here I have these holes. In this particular saber, one of the selling things was you can buy different attachments, and the way they attach together is they lock into those holes there, but I want to get rid of those. So I just got some scrap pieces of plastic, and I'm just going to go ahead and super glue that in there. Got my kicker so we can just move on. And just keep it simple, right? So plug those holes, good to go. All right, so now I gotta deal with the seams and then sort of the gap between where the door was for the battery. So I like these emery sticks, these nail file boards that I get from the dollar store. And what I'm doing here is I'm just getting rid of the seams. So the seams go away pretty nicely on this. Sometimes they fight you, but this one was good. So now I have like a 200 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to start to prep the piece for paint. But before paint, I'm going to do Bondo. So now I got some steel wool, and I always like to do a full pass with steel wool just to make sure everything's nice and cleaned up and, has gotten hit by some kind of abrasive so paint will stick to it. So now we got to address this big seam around the battery door, right? This is probably the most egregious thing. So if you've watched any of my videos before, I say this all the time, Bondo is, you know, that's a skill, right? And I tend to get it everywhere, and then it's a pain to sand off. So what I like to do is just mask off the areas where I'm going to apply the Bondo, and then while it's curing, you know, if I get it into a place where I don't want it, it's just going to be on tape, and I'm not going to have to sand it off. I can just, you know, flick it off. All right, so now just a little bit of Bondo in the kicker, and you really got to mix this in good. You can't have any streaks, or else you're gonna have to do the whole thing all over, and it's just no fun, right? So you got to work quickly. So now I'm just putting the Bondo into these gaps. And I think this is why I'm not great with the Bondo, because there is a little bit of a clock on this, right? So now I'm taking another plastic tool, and I'm just trying to reduce the amount of excess. So now this is dried. Usually I wait a day, but I live in Southern California. It's pretty hot out, so I put it in the sun. So now what I'm trying to do is get rid of the excess Bondo, but also too, I want to be careful to make sure that I maintain the design elements of the piece, right? I don't want to go ahead and sand over that ridge that I filled with Bondo. I want to make it look like it's all clean, right? So now I'm going to hit the thing with a primer, and this is going to show where we have just a little more work to do, right? So the Bondo did 90% of it. So now we're going to take the air drying spot putty, and you know, this is meant to be thin. It dries quick and it sands easily. But what we're doing is we're just filling in the little voids. Usually they're like scratches or pinpricks that by putting a coat of primer called our attention to, right? So you see there, it's just a little bit, and 90% of that's going to be sanded off. So now I'm doing a sanding, and what you do here is I like to do this by hand, because you sand and then you run your finger over it and you make sure that you have a smooth surface, and all those seams are gone. All right, so now I'm going to clean this off. Usually I clean it with isopropyl alcohol, but I was out, so I just made sure to clean it very well. So now I'm going to hit it with this nice gloss black that's also a primer. And this I let sit overnight, and as you can see, that looks great. So now we're going to do the graphite treatment. I love doing this, right? So this is just graphite for locks. You can buy graphite online. And all you're doing is rubbing this graphite into the paint. That's it, right? And I forgot to pick up rubber gloves. You definitely want to wear rubber gloves when you do this. I was like, well, I want to keep this train rolling, so I'll just deal with it. And it's really amazing. Like, a few things are like magic, right? This graphite is like magic. I mean, look at that. All I did was rub graphite on the black. So now this is a trick I do. When I have little tiny details that I want to pop, I'll use nail polish. Something about the way nail polish is made, especially when you're doing buttons and things, because it's supposed to be on a nail, it's just really easy, and there's always really cool colors, right? So I made those buttons blue because traditionally they're red. I just wanted to mix it up a little. So now I'm going to take some Rub It Buff, right? This is like a silver paste wax. We're just going to use a tiny, tiny bit of this, right? Usually I use my finger, but because this has this really nice finish, I wanted to just use Q-tips, just to have a little more control. And these Q-tips I like because you get them from the discount store, and they're horrible for your ears, but they're perfect for doing craft work because they're not really spongy, right? They're kind of firm, and I have more control over them. All right, so now I'm getting ready to prep the handle. What I want to do on the handle, just to give it a visual interest and an actual tactile element, is, you know, those wings, those hand grips, I'm going to paint with Plastidip. So I need to mask out the part in between those fins. Actually, in the original prop, they're windshield wiper blades. All right, so now just taking my time, and this is why you let it dry overnight, right? When you're doing this masking, if you rush everything, it'll tend to pull the paint off. It's hard for me because I'm impatient, but it's better to wait, because then if you have to redo the whole thing, that's even worse than waiting, right? So now I prep this, and out back I put on the Plastidip, and I did like 3 or 4 coats of this, like 20 minutes between each coat. So now, because the Plastidip really grabs onto the tape as well, I'm just going to run an X-Acto knife over the length of the tape just to make sure that it doesn't pull off all that paint that we just put on, right? So go around the whole piece, carefully take off the tape, and then look at that, right? It's just like it hits the light differently. It just really elevates it. So now early on, we covered up this element, and this is a nice little reveal. That's great to have that color that it was originally. So now for the cap, I have these. These are meant to be to anti-skid, like to put on the bottom of furniture, like a table. And they're going to be perfect as an end cap. So what I did off camera is I painted this eye bolt, same color as the piece. And I'm just gonna super glue that on there. That's just like a happy accident. I had those laying around, and that's gonna fit perfectly. And I didn't wanna paint it because it's black rubber. And it's just these little details that your eye subconsciously picks up on, that it's actual rubber rather than something painted. And right now I'm just toothing it up because it has a fresh paint job on there, so it's very slick. And the same thing, that end cap, that piece of rubber is brand new. So I'm just giving it some gaps. And now here I have like a throwaway paintbrush where I can put full coverage of glue on there and just let that sit. Now we're good. So the final thing is weathering. So for this, I'm going to use the oils. I have a burnt sienna. Because this is mostly black, I'm going to use the dark brown. And, you've seen me do my sort of really excessive washes where I just bury the whole thing in acrylic paint. But with this, because we have this sort of chrome gloss finish, I'm just going to do selected areas, and I'm going to usually focus on the burnt sienna, right? Just so that pops. And most of this, you're wiping off, but you just want to give it just a little bit of life. And then also too, for the lens, for the eye, it just breaks it up. It's very, very hard to see, but it does add a lot, right? So now I'm just going through, making my last pass, sort of, do I leave that? Do I add a little more? It's just kind of like a little game, and it's like, no, game over, put it down, done. And now let's take a look at the beauty shots. Really, really happy with that finish, right? It's just spray paint and then the graphite rubbed on there. That's all it is, and it's amazing. And just that little blue button just really pops. And the fins, right, with the Plastidip. Very happy with the way this turned out. It's going on the shelf. Wow, that came out really good. Now, all the time when I go on these journeys, it's the best intentions. Sometimes things come out good. Sometimes you have to wrestle with them, and sometimes, you just have to start over. This exceeded all my expectations. Wow. I even went on Etsy. I just bought like an acrylic stand. I always talk about how these are mostly filmmaking props that I make, but this is going to go on my shelf because this is my lightsaber, right? The graphite looks awesome. The handle with the Plastidip. Oh, and it's unique, right? It's mine. And remember, this was $5, right? And then with the paint, probably another $4, $5. So in total, like about $10. Now I talk about how I have a lot of stuff on hand at the shop, but if you start from scratch, I don't think this would cost you more than $20. Wow, right? So, the weight too, putting those sinkers in there really helps. Well, I guess the only thing left to do now is to fire it up. I'd never fired up a lightsaber before. All right, here we go. Oh, yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to practice some more with that. Well, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. I love to read the comments. And be sure to check out the merch shop. You might have noticed I have a Core Geek shirt on. I'm practicing what I preach, right? This graphite treatment I learned from Core Geek. And like me, he shares all his information for free online. So how can I say thank you? I went and bought one of his t-shirts to say thank you. Same thing. So if you check out our merch shop, we got the hats, we got the t-shirts. Buying that really helps support the channel. And remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi.